Hi, my name is Amy Sangster. I'm the soil specialist for Perennia, and today we're going to demonstrate how to take a proper soil sample. One of the most important steps and one of the first steps in any cropping system really is to try and assess what level of nutrients are in your soil. And you'll do this by taking a soil sample and then sending it off to a laboratory which will perform an analysis on it, and you'll get the results back. However, the results that you get back are only as good as the sample you send in. So it's really important to make sure that you start off on the right foot. For the most part, most farmers are interested in getting an idea of what the nutrient concentration is on average over their field, because they want to come up with a nutrient recommendation. So this field actually is a pretty uniform field, and what we're going to do in this field is take something called a composite sample. So you start with your first sample. I'll take this one from the shovel, and you just put it in your bucket. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk across the field in a random pattern. I like to do a bit of a zigzag pattern so I can keep track of where I've been. And we're going to sample, probably take about 20 of these samples before we come back and take our sub-sample to send off to the lab. You know, a lot of people have asked me how many samples to take per field. A lot of the time you'll see the recommendation is usually between 15 and 20 samples to take your sub-sample from to make your composite sample. But just keep in mind, the more samples you take, the better your average. Fields with some topography to them, you'll find that there's variability, quite a bit of variability in the soil there, could be from top to bottom across the side. And in these fields, you may want to sample the top part of the field a little bit differently, especially if you're noticing that there's some difference in crop yield or crop health. And if that's the case, that's absolutely fine. Just keep track of what you've done and the reasons why. The biggest thing with soil sampling is to start with the question, why are you sampling? In this field, again, even though there will be variability in any field, but for the most part it's fairly flat. The variability here may be less than in other fields. We're on a dikeland soil, so I'm going to go across, I'm going to treat this field as though it's one, and what I'll get when I send this sample in is I'll get one result back for the entire field. The other sampling pattern you can do is a grid sampling pattern. And with a grid sample, you've got a set unit within the field. Basically, you're setting up a grid and you're taking one sample per grid. This is used more often in precision agriculture, and you can certainly adjust your fertility applications or your soil amendments according to specifically the values you get per grid. But you can imagine for a field, you're sending in a lot more samples, it can get a little more pricey, and then it's just a little more intense in terms of trying to sort out how you're going to change your soil amendment rates according to what you get back for results. But again, used in precision agriculture. A lot of agronomists will recommend the fall for sampling, and the assumption here is that things aren't going to change very much from the fall over to the winter to the spring. So when you're sampling in the fall, what the test is going to tell you, it's going to predict what plant available nutrients are available, but it's on that particular day actually that you sampled. For most of the nutrients in your soil test, they're not going to change significantly that much for you to probably have to adjust your fertility recommendations in the spring. If you really wanted to know what plant available nutrients are in the soil, you'd want to sample the day your crop is growing technically, and then you know what the crop is actually going to potentially be able to access. So you can sample in the spring, you can sample before you plant as well, but the fall becomes more popular when people are trying to come up with their plans of what they're going to do for that following spring, and they want to order their fertilizer, their lime, or whatever other soil amendment they're planning on putting on. When you're finished sampling your field, what you'll get is, in this field actually, the cores have all remained intact. It's a heavier soil and there's a bit of moisture in the ground. So before you send your sub-sample in, what you want to do is you want to break up those cores and really make sure you get a good homogeneous sample. Again, we're looking for an average, the average fertility in this field. So the better you mix up this sample, this larger sample, the better your results will be. So once you've sufficiently mixed up your cores and broken them apart, the Department of Agriculture, the lab here in Truro, has a number of these soil sample boxes that are available at your local agricultural office. If you don't have a box, a bag will do just fine as well. But the lab will actually air dry these samples once they receive them, so it makes their job a little easier. And also, they've added a spot here on the box where you can label what field you sampled in, when you sampled it. You can also add in your address and your own name, so it'll keep your sample straight, especially if you've got a number of fields to sample. What I would also do is make a little note for yourself what this field is going to be in next year. And when you drop this off to the lab, they'll give you a sample submission form. And the more information you give them, the more information you get back. So make sure to include what crop you're going to be growing next year. This is important because if you don't, you won't get your fertility recommendations or your fertility ratings for that particular crop that you want to grow. So for your macronutrients, they'll give you the levels back, but it's hard to put those in context unless you have them rated. So with these boxes, I just take a sub-sample and I try to remove any biases, so I don't even look at what I'm putting in the box. And it's about 2 cups, and you can fill it right up to the top. And there's your soil sample.